to tonight's presentation of the comprehensive plan's draft report. We're going to allow Stuart, our planning consultant, to go ahead and make a presentation on that. So first I'd like to welcome everybody here. We have members of the town board, we have some members of the planning board, we have members of the zoning board of appeals here, and we have members from the committee who we're going to recognize at the end of the meeting later tonight. The meeting format's going to be pretty simple. I'm just going to make a few brief comments about a parallel process that we've got going on right now with the county airport rezoning. Then Stuart is going to give his presentation. We're going to have questions and answers, and of course we're going to let the town supervisor make some introductory welcoming remarks himself. Bernie?
Thank you. I just feel so good this evening. Without even coordinating formally, you know, Phil has chosen to do a look-alike. So I'm honored that he wants to
emulate my boss. Yeah,
that worked out pretty well.
The town uniform.
The town uniform. There we go.
I don't have the tan.
No, the tan was fun getting, I'll tell you. Anyway, as Phil said, thank you so much for coming this evening. We really do have a nice mix of individuals that have worked on the project, been involved in the community, community members that are interested in what's next. And truly, I think that question will be addressed tonight. I am excited. I think I'm excitable, but this really has excited me a great deal. And there's a saying that if you don't, I've used this before, but it's the best one. If you don't know where you're going, how do you know when you get there? Huh? And this project, under the guidance of Stuart and Colin Reed, who will be here a little bit later, the committee, I'm going to let them introduce the committee members. You need to be introduced and acknowledged. Absolutely phenomenal. Phil and I began talking about this. I think Phil spent my first year, we need to be thinking, you know, it's master plan time again, and it's like, Phil, you know, let me get grounded a little bit. And a few months later, Bernie, you know, we need to get organized. And we did. We talked about how the Comprehensive Land Use Planning Committee name came about. We talked about the who, and we thought about, you know, the people we'd like to see on a committee like that. And oh my God, they said yes. You know, because it's been a lot of work, an awful lot of work. The pay wasn't too great by any means. Even though I think the first time I saw Phil coming out with the water bottles and the cheese and the crackers and whatever, I go, "What, Phil? What are you doing?" That's not in the budget. Every time we have a meeting, somebody will expect snacks. That group should have had T-bone. Truly dynamic, highly successful. I've had a chance to read both drafts quite comprehensively. And I'm sorry for the statisticians getting through some of the demographics and the data, which was necessary collection, was a little more of a task. And then I got in through the history, and we got into what this group thought we'd like to be, and then I got into how we get there. And I never really thought a document like this would go as well as that one did with the prescription. And it answered the question, now what, so what? What's next? What's my job? And I've been sharing with our town board and with department heads, how does what you want, the resolution we're going to discuss, achieve those goals right now. And I'm very proud and pleased that I think the town has embraced that, as Phil and others have shared this with us. And we're making decisions now thinking about how does it help us get there. We know where we're going now, or we think we do, and we hope you'll like it. It's the place I want to be. Many of us have talked about the town of Plattsburgh, how we go other places and come back and say, wow, that's a nice place to live. Wow. What do they have I don't have? Let's do it. Let's get it. We know, in my mind, you're either growing or dying. We can't afford that. It's very important in this day and age. We've got to be building our tax base. We know we have to have jobs. I've talked to the people at the state, at the federal levels. None of you create jobs. We do. You will create the resources, give us the tools. We create the jobs. We have to do certain things. Art Lefebvre joined us this evening. Arthur, during his administration many years ago as town supervisor, really saw the need to do things like what we call the expressway, widening Route 3 to a 4-lane highway, getting the water, the sewer, and the utilities out there that creates the environment that becomes attractive. It's huge. And when you think about some of the things you may have been reading recently, what's been going on at Schluter, we see Nova Bus up the road, Spencer ARL, APG Neuros across the road. Things are truly happening. We have another announcement that will probably be out before long, and Phil always, I'll go in and say, Phil, oh wow, this is great and exciting. He usually says, oh, Bernie, you know. they may, whatever. The fact that we may have a Marriott product here next to a Hilton product is more exciting than the jobs, the tax base, the construction. What it tells me is this town is making progress during what has been in our lifetime were the most challenging economic times of all. We've still grown. Do we lose? Sure. Do we gain? Yes. What's the net difference? I don't know. You know, but as I've thought about it, there are things like the, well, I can't think of the company now, I'm having that out moment, Champlain, that was their turn of the century and beyond, was huge, 700 employees.
Myers.
Before Myers. Harris.
Sheridan, Harris.
Sheridan, thank you. Sheridan and I are working, huge. I'm told the automobile company that was in Plattsburgh. Yes, well, see, I really knew, but I'm trying to get participation. Amen. Amen. Stewart's from the South. He's from Glens Falls. They have 400 employees. Things do change. You know, Wayne Gretzky's in answer to the question, you know, what makes you so great? You all remember Wayne. He said, I go where the puck's going to be, not where it is. This town's going where the puck's going to be. And the work that Phil, guided by Stewart, and that committee have done, if you can't get excited about that, you're not excitable. Because it truly begins to create the town. And we're different. We all have different beliefs and ideologies and philosophies. But I think there's something in this for absolutely everybody. It's where you want to be. It's where you want your children and grandchildren. It's where you can step back in the future and say, wow, I played a role in that. So I hope, as Stewart unfolds the plan, I'm going to turn it right over to him. I hope you become excited. I'm going to turn it back to Phil for the very well plan. I was going to look at the notes in my palm, but I didn't. I hope you really begin to look for that. What we want to hear tonight is what's missing. And if you're sitting there and you're worried about the parcel right here, ask us. I mean, this is not controlling the future. It's simply defining where we want to go. And how we get there will be our job to try and make that happen to everybody's benefit. There's something for everybody. I think this is one of the most dynamic, and I can't be evaluated because I didn't read the others. But I think this is one of the most dynamic plans at one of the most crucial times in the local economy. And I'm very proud to have been here during that time. And boy, I said it the other day, I'll say it every time for all of you that worked on that. Great job, and thank you very much. Phil.
Just real quickly, thanks, Bernie. In the back, we've got some discs of the comprehensive plan. So those are available. We've got, for your viewing to look at now, some copies of the color draft plan that we had. If you'd like a copy of the black and white, we're making a distinction because of the cost of the reproduction here. We can make those available for you. But the real important thing that I'm going to go over right now very quickly is, James, you're going to have a slide up here about the airport rezoning. There are two things that are going on simultaneously here. Stuart's going to very quickly get into it when he covers the comprehensive plan. But I want to point out that the town board has in an open period right now for comments on rezoning the county airport. May 3rd, the Monday night, 6:35 here at the town hall, will be the public hearing to hear comments relative to the airport zoning district. James is going to jump on and jump out of the PowerPoint slide. What he's got up here right now is the town webpage. He's live on the internet right now with the town webpage. This is the home page right here, and here is an opportunity to make a link right directly from the home page to the zoning map, which is right up here, the proposed zoning map, or, James, you're going to click on that. By clicking on underneath of the map, we come to the planning department. You scroll down on the planning department, you're going to see, hold on. You see that we've got the town of Plattsburgh draft plan. So the whole draft plan that Stuart's going to be talking about is available in bits and pieces, both the maps and the chapters. And then we also have the county airport zoning, both the text amendment as well as the zoning map. So I just want to go ahead and make tonight's presentation clarify that the two parts, the airport rezoning is related to the overall comprehensive plan, but the May 3rd public hearing coming up is going to be just for the 600 acres of the former county airport property. You may have all realized that the county is going to be offering that property for sale here very shortly. And in preparation of that, the town has, through a subcommittee of the larger comprehensive plan, addressed specifics about creating 3 sub-districts within that and a new zoning text. So I wanted to cover that. And with that said, I'm going to turn the meeting over now to Stuart. Tom?
You said there were copies back here for people. I
There-
noticed there's also a zoning map over here, and I was wondering if each of us would get one of those edible zoning maps if we wanted one.
Well, I think hopefully by the evening being over, we will have consumed that map. I'm glad to see that you happen to notice that. We do have refreshments for afterwards, so if you'll just hold on just a little while, we'll be able to get to coffee and cake. Stuart?
Thank you. Thanks, Bill, and thanks, Bernie. My name is Stuart Messinger. I'm a planner with the Chazen Companies in Glens Falls. We were hired, I guess, a year ago in January to help the town prepare the comprehensive plan. It's been a really exciting experience for me. It was a great group of people to work with. They fed me, and I think that's one of the reasons we worked so hard. So don't knock that. I'm going to put it in all my future contracts if they have to feed me. Whoops. Help.
You need to escape back.
Okay, and so maybe I'll try the red button this time. All right, red button didn't go. Maybe that button. Yeah, there we go. Okay. I'm going to talk for about 20 minutes and try and walk you through what we did in the plan, and then we'll have a question and answer period, and hopefully as many of those can be answered by members of the committee who are here as by me. So let me just talk about why we did this. The town currently has a master plan that was written in 1999, and good practice is to update plans every 5 to 10 years, with 10 sort of being more normal. So that's one reason. Take a fresh look at where we want to go. It provides a blueprint for the town, a vision of what we want to have happen in the future. It serves as the basis for zoning. In New York, the law says that you have to adopt zoning pursuant to a comprehensive plan. So if we want to do things like change our county airport zoning, we need to have it backed up by a plan that says why we're going to do it and how it fits in with the other changes in town. The comprehensive plan serves as the basis for grantsmanship and getting funding. If we want to get money for projects, the state and other organizations that give money and loans say always, where does this fit into your plan? How does this fit into the big picture? And if you don't have an up-to-date plan, they say, well, you know, we're going to go give it to somebody who has a vision that needs, so it gets you money. And the final reason, sort of the big reason, is that it creates energy to implementation. The town has actually already started to do some of the things that I'm going to talk about, because as we worked over the last year, we said, geez, this is such a good idea, it can't wait. Let's get going. And it builds sort of a group of citizens like we have here who say, I want to do things. And you know, government, it's funny, where people come to meetings in droves when they're unhappy about things. And one of the things that I've noticed is that people in Plattsburgh are not unhappy. They're pretty happy with what you've done so far. The people who've come are people who are movers and shakers and are interested in the future of the town, and are generally the folks who are going to get on committees and implement the plan. And that's a good thing. So how do we do it? First thing we did is we formed a steering committee of town residents. I understand there's a radio personality in town who's talked about the plan a couple times, and I understand that one of the things he said was, geez, a bunch of people sitting around a table could have come up with this. And I thought to myself, the guy is a genius. That's the point. That's exactly the point. is that a plan is produced by the citizens in the town, not by me. My job is to help put together data, information, the maps, so on, and to kind of help them through options and what other people do. But the ideas come from the people in the town. And we were lucky to have a really good group of people, had an array of interests. They didn't always agree. They sometimes disagreed sharply, but they talked it through. And I think the plan represents a consensus. Not everybody agrees with everything in it, but I think it's a consensus. We also formed a subcommittee to address the airport rezoning because the town wanted to move the airport rezoning ahead quickly at the same time of the plan. Remember I said that the plan is the basis for zoning. We want to rezone, we want to do something with the airport now rather than in the future, so we needed to move it forward at the same time. And we'll talk a little bit more about the airport in a second. We collected a lot of information. The maps that you see around the room are some of the maps that we made, a whole lot of data. We understood it, we inventoried, we talked about it, we analyzed it. We had a series of public meetings. We had stakeholder interviews, which is we went out and we talked to people who are leaders in the community about what they wanted to see happen. We did some visioning about what we wanted to see Plattsburgh develop into, and then we developed recommendations and implementation measures. Standard process. And we did it in good time. We did it in good time. Did I not get James? I'm two ahead.
We were glitch-free earlier today.
I'm sure it's my fault. Okay, next one. Next one. Okay. You sit right there, man.
You're not going to get any food.
Because you're doing a really good job. And I'm going to grab my water.
Should have kept the tie, James.
So let me just talk for a few minutes about some of the information that we thought was important in the development of the plan. One is, as Bernie said, the town's population has been slowly growing over the last decade, about a little under 0.5% a year. That's sort of an average growth rate. It's important, especially in sort of the times that we're in. You are a population center. You're a place that people are coming to. You're a desirable place. But your young people aren't staying. People graduate high school and they leave. And a lot of people said that's a problem. We'd like to have jobs that keep young people in town. And so those numbers are really obvious when we look at the demographic. You're mostly a single-family town. You know that. 25% of the town's housing stock is mobile homes. That's a really high percentage. And it kind of couples with that the condition of some of your housing, especially your lower-end housing, isn't great. There are housing issues in Plattsburgh, and especially at the lower income levels, housing affordability is a problem in town. And so those are a couple issues that we needed to think about. On the good side, there's plenty of land for new development. You don't have, like a lot of communities do, shortage of lands or lands that's really constrained by wetlands or steep slopes or other kinds of things. And I'll just sort of skip ahead. You have an extensive water and sewer system. Great credit to Art, if it was Art who helped develop that back in the day, because for a town of your size, you have an extremely robust infrastructure and also a park system to go with it. And those are real assets for you folks as you grow and develop. And of course, you have a robust commercial center. You are the commercial center for the region. Brings a lot of people into town, obviously generates a lot of tax revenue. Plattsburgh used to be more of an agricultural town. You still have a lot of good agricultural soils, but most of them are gone fallow. They're no longer in use. They're overgrown. So thinking about the future of those soils, whether we want to think about an agricultural future of any kind for Plattsburgh, as people think about localism and as energy patterns change, was something that we considered in the development of the plan. You're keeping up with me, good man. Plattsburgh is a community of neighborhoods, and the neighborhoods differ from place to place. And so one of the things that we were thinking about is how do we take into account the differing character of each neighborhood? How do we plan for the fact that Cumberland Head isn't the same as Cadyville isn't the same as Treadwell's Mills? They have different concerns and different needs. The town works with the city hand in glove in many ways, and I don't mean in a cooperative sense, but in an economic sense and in a living sense. When people think about Plattsburgh, they probably think about the city They maybe think about the town. They often don't distinguish between the two. The town provides some kinds of employment. You're the commercial and manufacturing employment center. The city provides other kinds of employment. And one of the things that we talked a lot about around the table is how can we get the city and town to cooperate more in provision of services and the things they do. I know nobody likes taxes, but relative to other communities of your size, you have a relatively low tax rate, and that's an asset. And it has a lot to do with the big commercial sector, and it has a lot to do with the big manufacturing sector. So nobody likes taxes, but it could be a lot worse. I've been down a lot lately in Westchester County. I know it's a bad comparison, but you know, the median average house pays more than $20,000 in taxes in Westchester County. It's insane. It's just nuts. And the food isn't any better down there, Bob, than it is here. So issues. So these are some of the other things, and kind of observations and issues bleed together a little bit, but I organized it this way. So you have a lot of manufacturing jobs, but your wage scale is lower than many other parts of the state. That's not to say it's terrible or unusual or anything, but it is lower than that in many other parts of the state, and that has something to do with the earlier comment about young people leaving. And so thinking about how we attract businesses that might pay a higher wage scale was something we spent a lot of time talking about. The need to improve the housing stock, especially for low-income residents, we spent a lot of time talking about. We talked about the way the commercial areas look and function. And we thought that the commercial areas, do a great thing for the town because they bring people, they generate a lot of revenue. They could look better, they could be more sightly, and they could function better, especially with respect to both pedestrian and vehicle connections between them. We said you had a lot of land, which you do, but we have very little idea of the ecological value of pieces of land. We've never done a study in Plattsburgh about where there might be important habitats or important species. We don't know. And one of the things that I kind of repeatedly asked the committee is, what are the special places? What are the places that we should save? And everybody, they had areas they liked to walk in or they liked to look at, but we couldn't say because we'd never studied or looked at those issues. You're a car-dependent town, which is nice, but gas is getting to be more expensive. We don't have a lot of trails in the town or other pedestrian facilities. When we start to think about attracting businesses that want to pay a higher wage scale, one of the things they look for is quality of life for their employees, because people, especially executives and higher paid people, want to live in a community that is amenity rich and has quality of life things, and trails are one of those quality of life features. If you go down to where I live, it's sort of an essential part of where we are. Everybody goes out on the bike trail, everybody goes out on the river trail. It's sort of a next generation thing for you folks, so we talked a little about that. I just spoke a little bit a minute ago about the difference between the town and the city and how people sort of don't distinguish between them. There's no sense of arrival in Plattsburgh. I think if you weren't a local, and you came into town, you'd have a hard time saying, well, I'm in Plattsburgh now. You probably know when you're in the city because it would be built up. But sort of what planners like to call a sense of place is not terribly out there for people to see. So we talked about that a little bit. We spent a lot of time as a subcommittee talking about the airport property and what we wanted to do with that, and I'm going to get to the conclusions of that in just a minute. So vision. We spent a couple of meetings on a vision statement. Vision statement is really an idea of what it is that we want to come, and what do we want to be, and we want to make sure that our recommendations are consistent with that. And I tried here, without putting the whole thing down on paper, to boil it down to 3 pieces. Which I think are fair. And they are attractive, both physically and in a business sense, to people who live here, to visitors, to tourists. And attractive has many elements that we could go into. Sustainable. Sustainable in both an environmental and a human sense. That's a word that gets bandied around a lot, but with good reason. Because we want to create a community that's going to be here in the next 10, 20, 50, 100 years, and is able to continue in a way that can make livelihoods for us all. And that gets to the third one, which is quality of life. Plattsburgh is sort of a real success story in a lot of ways, because when the Air Force Base closed, and so many people left, many, many communities would have gone into a death spiral. I mean, that's typically what you say. Think about when you read about a mining community or a logging community or an auto manufacturing community, and the big business leaves, what happens? They dry up and blow away. That didn't happen here. And that's a real testament, I think, to the people who live here and who led here, who were able to bring in another group of businesses in the next generation. You have real assets in your location close to Canada and on I-87. We're not the Mexico of Canada, right? Okay, I hate to use that analogy, but you have assets and you have reasons that people want to live here, and you're beautiful. You know, it's a high quality of life. I didn't know much about Plattsburgh coming up from Glens Falls, and you're different in some ways, but you have assets that we don't. You know, you have a college, you have a beautiful lake, and I've just been really impressed with it. And we get people who retire into our community from Long Island and Westchester County. They sell their house and cash out and move up here because they came to vacation in Lake George. One of the things we talked about is that may be a trend for you in the future too, when people realize what you've got up here. It's just a long way away and they need to find out about it. So quality of life is the third leg of that vision statement. So now I'm going to spend a little bit of time on recommendations. And I'm not going to talk about all of them in detail. I really want to touch on the ones that I think are especially important. You can ask questions about some of them that you might see up here as I go through. Economic development, the need to attract higher paying jobs, the need to attract a sort of a next generation of businesses that maybe will employ our youth so that they can stay around. One leg of that is business parks. Corporate style businesses like to locate in business parks. They want a sort of a quality of I don't know, quality of corporate life. They want a style of development, and they desire that. Okay, we don't really have that kind of corporate business park. We have some pieces of it. We have some individual businesses that are in corporate business park setting type places, but we don't have the business park itself. That's one element. Second element that I want to talk about is the county airport property. A lot of discussion about that, and frankly, it's sort of a key to the future of your town. If you put a racetrack on it, you'll have one kind of town. It'll bring a lot of people in. It'll generate one kind of economic development. We talked about that. We met with the people who would like to do that. At the end of the day, the committee thought that what it wanted to do was to create a mixed-use development on that property with a substantial planned business park. And what we did is we created a 3-sub-district zone. This is called a mixed-use sub-district. These we're calling industrial sub-districts, and these are conservation sub-districts. The idea of the mixed-use sub-district is what planners call, if you've heard these terms, a neo-traditional or a new urbanism style development. The idea is a village-style hamlet where there is a higher density of housing than you have elsewhere in the town, where you might be organized around a central green, where you have commercial in the middle, apartments, and then radiating out from that houses on single-family lots, but not suburban densities, more village densities like the village that I happen to live in. And like we used to build in this country. That's exactly how we used to build. And we got away from it when we became more auto-dependent and built suburbs and out in the country. You have that in Plattsburgh. There's nothing wrong with it. The idea is to take this piece of property and create a new center of Plattsburgh in the middle of it. And then these two districts are intended to have a limited set of uses. And those uses would be intended to things like high technology businesses, green manufacturing businesses, photovoltaic businesses, nanotechnology businesses, the kind of next generation businesses that generate high wages, high employment, that when they come, they tend to have other businesses circle around the mothership to service them. It's the kind of thing that if you followed down where I live, the AMD and now Global Foundries building a nanochip plant in the town of Malta, huge economic development project. They don't all have to be that big. Further down in the Hudson Valley, the town of Kingston, the city of Kingston is trying to create a photovoltaic cluster where they're attracting one by one companies that do that kind of manufacturing. And they're being picky. And this is sort of a key point, is that when Plattsburgh rebounded from the airport closing, you were successful in attracting lots of businesses, but you didn't say, we want this kind of business and not that kind of business. And the idea in this park is not to say, there'll be other places in town for businesses to locate, but in this park, in this place, we want very select businesses. We want to get what we want to get. We're not going to take just anybody. We're going to take the kinds of businesses that I just talked about that will generate high-quality, high-wage jobs. And we'll hold out. We'll wait for them because you're going to have a corporate park environment, and they're going to be next to a mixed-use development with a very, very high quality of life. Walkable, shops, restaurants, a place where people want to live and work. It's a vision that we think can be successful. It's going to depend on finding the right developer. Bernie said that we create the jobs. I would say that government creates the conditions for the jobs. The jobs are created by the private sector. The conditions that you create are the infrastructure, which you've done a wonderful job at, the zoning, which we're working on now, and sort of progressive policies. Okay, and I think Plattsburgh has those three pieces in place to attract businesses. And again, the key is Canadian businesses, if you ask me, because you're over the border where costs are lower for them. So that's a little bit about the airport property. I'm going to go to the next page and talk about housing affordability, because this was a real issue. And it's an interesting conundrum when I write plans, is that this problem is very obvious from the numbers, the affordability and housing condition problems. But it always happens on committees like ours that we tend not to have people who live in that housing represented. And so we kind of rub our hands and go, yeah, we know it's a problem, but what do we do about it? And I have to say this committee sort of took that on a little bit, especially Tom Wood, who represents a lot of folks, and said, look, I'm going to be an advocate for people who have housing issues, and we're going to talk about this. And so we did. And the town's actually done a lot. The town has programs and applies for grants and has a pretty robust rehabilitation program. And so what we've done is made a series of recommendations that build on that, that encourage that to continue, and maybe make a couple of other suggestions for expanding on it. The idea isn't government giveaways of housing. The idea is to help people improve their housing so they can live here, have a higher quality of life. And that's what I want to say about that. Commercial development, we talked about appearances. The plan recommends that we develop commercial design guidelines. Commercial design guidelines have to do with how the commercial areas function and look. So they might address things like signage, facades, internal connections, the landscaping, how they look along the street frontage. They would not be retroactive in the sense that they wouldn't, when you put them into the zoning, that would make all the commercial developments suddenly have to come into compliance. What would happen is as people came in for building permits, they'd fall under the commercial design guidelines. And so it's an evolutionary process. And it's typically how communities do it. It works elsewhere. People are not always happy with it right away. And what the guidelines are, it will be something that we have to work out in zoning. True draconian, we'll get our heads handed to them. But if we don't have a vision and try and make them make the commercial areas more functional and better looking, then we haven't done our job. So that'll be one that the devil will be in the details. But we were pretty well agreed it was something we needed to do. I talked about the difference in the hamlets. What we're suggesting is that the folks in the hamlets come together and create mini plans for each hamlet, where they might want to have improvements, where they might want to have infrastructure, and so on. It was kind of beyond our scope to do that for every hamlet. Not every hamlet may want to do it. The folks on Cumberland Head seem very active and involved in their community. They may want to do it ahead of some of the other ones, but we think it's a good idea. In terms of infrastructure, most of the town is pretty well served. Our only sort of extension recommendation had to do with bringing the sewer district out to Morrisonville. Other than that, as I said already, we have some remarkable infrastructure. Transportation, we had a number of recommendations. One was the development of a connector road between Routes 3 and 374 in the Wallace Hill Avenue. We thought, and I think that's a recommendation that is in your current plan that hasn't been implemented yet. We talked a little bit about gateways and the idea of creating sort of a theme for the town and a way of sort of letting people know when they come in on the major thoroughfares that they're in a place now. Access management guidelines, especially with respect to minimizing curb cuts in commercial areas. Complete streets is the idea that streets ought to be designed not just for cars, but also for pedestrians and bikers so that everybody can share the street together. And then some recommendations about improving access and linkages. Open space. You have a lot of open space. One of the ways to protect open space is clustering or conservation subdivision guidelines. What that means is the concept is that, let's say I have 100 acres and it's zoned 1 acre, rather than put up sort of conventional subdivision style, a house on every 1 acre and use up the entire parcel, I might look at it and say, well, here's some, we talked about agricultural soils a little bit ago. This part of the property has good agricultural soils, and this part of the property has nice woods. Let's cluster the houses together on smaller lots. I still get my 100 lots, but let's preserve some of that land as open space. You don't have to mandate it on every property. It depends on the individual property. But it has many advantages. It results in lower costs because I have to build less infrastructure, right? It creates open space. It lets you look at the good parts of the property and preserve them. And it ties into some of the other recommendations in the plan. We talked a little bit about mechanisms of preserving open spaces, but I'm going to get to in just a minute. We're not sure what the best, at least ecologically important ones are, and that's going to get into to a recommendation that I probably should have put in my here, but it's going to be permitted. So I'll just take it out of order. One of our other recommendations is that the town ought to partner perhaps with SUNY to do an inventory of its biology and its ecology, so we can figure out where are the ecologically important open spaces, because we've got a lot of land, but we're not sure which, if any, of it has important habitats or is important creatures. Once we know that, we can say, well, these are the areas we shouldn't avoid, and these are the areas we should protect, and these are the areas that it's okay to move on. So that's what I wanted to say about open space. With respect to agriculture, this ties into the clustering recommendation. We have many thousands of acres of good agricultural soil. It's for the most part not used for agriculture anymore. We had a lot of discussion about to what extent we thought we might want to preserve the good soil. So we just want to say forget about it, because let's face it, there's a lot of farms around Plattsburgh. We can't argue with that. On the other hand, it may be that there will come a day that we wish we had preserved some of them for local farming. If the price of energy is so crazy expensive that food goes out of sight, that we want to have farms and food closer. So we want to have the planning board in its development review process think about that. That's not to say that we're going to say you can't build on a good soil, but we want you to think about it and use this clustering technique that we talked about a little bit ago to perhaps preserve some of those soils. And then we had a series of just sort of zoning-oriented recommendations that I won't go into with regard to how we regulate agriculture. So the next one has to do with ecology. I already talked about this townwide habitat inventory. Environmental education options. One of the things that we talked about was the possibility of developing nature trails. Remember, we talked about we don't have a lot of trails in Plattsburgh. Boardwalks with signs, the kind of place you can take a family or a kid out and learn about what's going on. And you do have some nice wetland areas, and you have some nice woods areas where you could start to do something like that. And one of the ideas that we talked about that might be a little more pie in the sky, but sometimes we do that in these kinds of plans, was the idea of one day restoring a salmon fishery to the Saranac River. The state did that, for those of you who are fisher people, out on coming off the Tugco Plateau and Pulaski and those towns north of Syracuse. I don't know if you've ever been out there. I have, because I am a fisher people. And Pulaski is a town that's devoted entirely to salmon fishing. It's just lined with bait and tackle and boat shops. That's what they do out there. It could be another part of an economy. So not totally pie in the sky, something to advocate for in the future, and obviously the state's got to come up with some money first. One of the themes of our plan is the idea of health and wellness, and recreation is only one component of that. I've talked already a couple times about how quality of life and what companies look for when they come to a place, and that ties into the idea of health and wellness. And so one of the things that we thought we needed to was create a recreation master plan that would look at what you have now and what your needs are in the future, so that you can begin planning for it. And that's an example of a project that's already underway. We kind of got to that part of the plan, and Tom said, that's a good idea. Let's move forward with that. So that actually piece is already underway. And part of that, going with that, is the idea of a town-wide trail system. And I've already talked about the reasons we thought that was a good idea. Potentially one day, a community center, a blue water, which would be like a canoe trail along the Saranac River with marked put-ins and takeouts. Footpaths on Cumberland Head. A footpath being sort of a type of trail, maybe low impact, not heavily marked. But again, you have some beautiful land out there. The idea is that people can walk. Potentially a cross-country ski and snowmobile trail network on some of the public lands out in the western part of the town. They are used informally for some of those purposes now. What a wonderful thing to have a formal network. And bicycle paths. We had 1 or 2 bikers on our committee, and they advocated quite forcefully for that particular initiative. And that kind of ties into the next piece, which is the greening of Plattsburgh. We talked a little bit about green initiatives, both as the town runs, the idea that the town ought to think about how it operates and how can it do so in a way that's more sustainable, and in our review of projects, promote green and sustainable development so that it's energy efficient and so forth. We haven't talked much about historic resources. One of the fun things for me about this project, because I like history, was to learn about the town and all the things that have happened here. And you do have quite a number of resources. I'm not sure they're as well promoted as they could be. Something to think about. So we talked a little bit about that. Expanding telecommunications infrastructure into some of the rural areas of the town. We talked about, and I mentioned this earlier, encouraging shared services and cooperation between the city and the town. From what I can tell, your brothers and sisters like my brother and sister, where we squabbled a lot. We loved each other, but we squabbled a lot. And cooperation, as we got older, has proved out to be better for us. So as you guys get older, you can perhaps cooperate better with your brothers and sisters next door in Plattsburgh. A local water revitalization program is a kind of plan for the waterfront along Lake Champlain, probably a low priority item, but something that we talked about doing ultimately as a good idea. The town's appearance. You have some amazing view sheds. I mean, I can't think of too many other areas, in the state where you have a built-up community where one way you see one set of mountains and the other way you see another set of mountains, and you have this amazing lake in between. And there were concerns expressed about the way development is located, and we wanted to be sure we didn't block some of those views. In our airport master plan, we made a point of saying that development can't exceed a certain height or can't block the views of the mountains in certain parts of it. So we want to set it up so that you can actually see out to the mountains. That's going to be important as you develop, because you don't want to take away the beauty that attracts people here. So we have that in there. And then the other thing was that on some of your roadways that are not currently developed, you could adopt some overlay regulations that would basically encourage people to keep green strips along the road or limit the amount of cutting and clearing that you do for lots. And those go sort of hand in hand with the commercial design guidelines that we were talking about earlier. And then finally, just real quickly, we have a couple of recommendations relating to emergency preparedness and document records keeping. I think some of the town went down to New York in February, and with all the things going on in the world, there's all of a sudden a lot of sort of emergency preparedness planning going on for communities, and I was myself thoroughly scared by it, and so should you be. And then finally, there's a lot of sort of technical stuff relating to amending the zoning and subdivision regulations. What will happen after the plan is done is we'll go through a period of implementing it in a number of ways. What we've done is we've created an implementation chart that divides the things that I've talked about into sort of high, medium, and low priorities. The high things are things we ought to do in the next couple of years. Medium is maybe 3 to 5 years, and then the lower sort of long-range things are out 5 to 10 years. And then we've talked about where the funding might come from. Some of it will have to come from the town. Some of it doesn't really cost much. Some of it can be done by volunteer people. Some of it comes from grants and loans. And so there's a lot of different ways to find money to do these things. One of the things that we need to do, though, is amend the zoning regulations and the subdivision regulations to do some of the things we've talked about, like the airport zoning piece, like the clustering piece. I'm not going to walk through these because I think it's too hard to do kind of up here. But in the back and on the plan, I don't know, where are they? On the back?
Here.
Yeah. Okay. There's 2 maps that illustrate many of the recommendations that I've talked about. One is the comprehensive plan recommendations map, and the other is the recreation recommendation map. They're in the copies of the plan. There's hard copies here, but they illustrate in classic planner bubble in line form. This is a bubble in line map. Many of the things that we've talked about, and so they're worth looking at. And I think with that, I tried to keep it, it's good timing, it's about 10 of 8. We'll do questions, and I think Bill and I will try and put it to the right committee member. We don't want to monopolize because I've talked enough. So that if committee members want to try and answer questions, that's good too. And with that, we'll open it up to questions, comments, and observations.
You did a great job, Stuart. I'm just going to, you know, what I've been finding in my conversations with people as they've made comments about some thoughts that they have about the plan or some question about the plan, I pulled the plan out, and I'm getting a little more used to working through this. There's a lot of pages here. There's a lot of information in here. But I have been amazed at, in just conversations with people, being able to run my fingers through this and at least come in and hone in to a statement, a concept, a vision, some aspect of addressing different parts that allow for us to gain a better starting point to continue to move forward to finding that puck that we're trying to go and be ahead of as it comes towards us. Debbie?
I read the plan, and I noticed there's a lot of talk about affordable housing and fixing up housing that needs to be fixed up, as there was in the 1999 plan. A lot of talk about affordable housing. When the county airport was in the rezoning process, I think there was something about affordable housing in that, which was subsequently taken out. And I was wondering, what do you see as affordable housing in the town of Plattsburgh, and where would you put affordable housing?
You know,
and what is affordable housing today?
Well, you know, to answer that is that it takes perhaps a group of people to arrive at an understanding of the concepts and the definitions. Across the lake from us in Burlington, the Chittenden County area has one of the best affordable housing programs in the nation. They actually, as a spin-off of that, there's a consulting group that has helped guide that county, that community, in answering those questions. They have a housing trust over there as a mechanism to work through. It's a partnering ship between government and not-for-profit organizations. So they've done a lot of shaping of the issue and defining some of the concepts or some of the terminology so that there's a common understanding, and then finding mechanisms to address a response to what they have determined to be definitions to those issues. The part about the airport zoning district, which would have been an opportunity, I think, that was picked up somewhat strongly by the subcommittee, to identify with a definition of 80% of the median income qualifying for support, and mechanisms to utilize whatever could be to achieve supplying housing stock to those people in that category. But we don't have any mechanism in this town to implement that. So here we're looking at this large piece of property that's got great potential, but there's no mechanism in the town of Plattsburgh that's in place to be able to more specifically address the implementation.
Well, you spoke about Chittenden County. My mother lives in Chittenden County, and there is affordable housing, and she lives in a very high-end condo area, and there is affordable housing that was built in that plan.
Yeah.
But affordable housing is in the several hundred thousand in that area.
It does. It certainly.
I mean, so.
It clearly, Stuart was talking about people so-called cashing in. You know, our generation, you know, selling their homes and making substantial amounts of money. The families that are moving in to buy that property are buying at a very, extravagant price. And so the workforce housing, which is sometimes what the definition we describe what workforce housing is, so that those people, all of us have children that are parents here, you know, that may be adults, and we've watched them have to, you know, those that have done well and gone to college, gotten a degree, and gone someplace and making good, earnings. Maybe it's not such an issue, but then there are some others of us that maybe that's not the case. And our children, as they're becoming young adults, can't find housing that's of good quality and accessible.
Just a comment on the question. In other communities where I will refer to the economic development as being in a mature state, it's not uncommon to see a developer come in and build 150 units. When you're building 150 units under the economy of scale, you can, it can be requested that there will be a certain number of these units that would meet a test of affordable housing, and so that you'll have a range of residents within units. We haven't had much of that kind of construction in our community. I mean, Champlain Park and Cliff Haven were the two areas that developed with, I'll say, 120 to 150 units being built, boom, in a very short period of time because of the airport space. Other than that, we just really haven't had that happen. What's very common for us is we might go through a building season and we might have 12 homes be built. They're all being built on an individual basis. They're not being built by a tract developer. So that enters into the problem. It's not that affordable housing gets thrown out as a viable idea, but you have to have an economy of scale in order to be able to accomplish what we're hoping could be accomplished at the airport property. Hope I said that right.
There will be certainly an opportunity for more density, for more opportunity for a larger amount of housing to come in a shorter period of time. The problem that we saw real quickly was, can a developer come in with a mandate to build housing for people who, when you do the math of the 80% of the median income, works out to, I can't remember exactly, it works out to an unlimited amount of $80,000 for that house on the market, in the marketplace. And they can't build a house in that range. And so we don't have mechanisms for incentives. We don't have a housing trust to step in and help subsidize that process. And it becomes difficult to work into that arena.
So in lieu of building affordable housing, you're advocating, if I can use the word, fixing or rehabilitating or improving housing that is already here that might be affordable housing.
Affordable housing is satisfied by the mobile homes. As you mentioned, there's 25% mobile homes. That's high. But it would be because of the missile sites that were built here in a hurry and the air base development and many other items, affordable housing was satisfied by mobile homes. And in fact, we got most of our mobile home districts now with full service, water and sewer. The intent is to eventually take and replace the mobile homes with a better structure as time goes on, and I think that's what you have to look at.
That's exactly what we say in here. That's exactly.
Does the master plan do anything to address the possible creation of affordable housing or low-income housing clustering, where you only have, ideally, what we're talking about on the county airport was the idea that if there's a lot of homes, some of them would be for affordable housing. And that was to keep the idea that I'm talking about from happening, where you create a mobile home park, but only with affordable housing. How do we take that stigma off?
Well, if this were to work as it has elsewhere, we hope it will work, a mix of housing, you'll get essentially upper story apartments in the downtown. What will function as a downtown will be one form of affordable housing. That's how we hope that need would be met here. We don't think it's likely that developers are going to build $80,000 single-family units, or even townhouses. It's just not going to happen in this district. So you go at it through a number of different approaches, and one of them is this kind of density, which results in sort of flats, we call them, that are affordable. The second is exactly as Art was saying, which is upgrading the existing housing stock so that it's an affordable housing stock and it's better than an old mobile home. And then the third, we mentioned the Housing Trust Fund, which is a sort of a public-private, quasi-public-private partnership, which helps sort of on a small scale individual basis people can get housing. It doesn't have to involve public money. It can, because some people are concerned about that kind of thing. And we don't know how it will function yet, but it's something that ought to be looked into.
I think you shouldn't address the fact that these mobile home districts can be replaced with modular homes or double wide.
Yep.
It's much more acceptable.
And
it's going to satisfy the housing.
And the state has
With
grant
all the
programs.
improvements are already there.
Yep, that's right. And the state has grant programs to help with that.
This community, the so-called mobile homes, but they're a type of manufactured housing. They've been very successful in marketing their product here. That industry is changing. I think that Steve can attest to some of the changes that he's seeing in the newer homes that are being built.
Yeah, they have changed from when Arthur was talking about homes. They were meant to truly have a life expectancy of 20 to 30 years. Now we're seeing HUD standards, what a single wide and double wide or manufactured homes are built to. Instead of 2x4 walls, there's some 2x6s. The roof pitches are 5x12. They're much steeper. The product that they're getting out of the factories is far exceeding what was done 30 years ago. The modular homes are built to New York State code standards, and there's actually a push in New York State to take the HUD standards off, because some of the double wide sections are being built up to New York State code standards instead of HUD. So some of the homes you can't even tell are single or double wides because they blend in so well to the community now.
HUD grants no longer provide money for trailers to be replaced. All the homes. They're being upgraded.
There's some, I think that program was tough.
DHCR, Office of Community Renewal, recently, I believe this last round of grants, you might know even better, Stuart, they added an option that would actually do a replacement of a mobile home.
But that particular option, there is a problem with it, and that is that there's not enough money to effectively utilize that. You know, it might be 50%, but no more than I'm going to say $40,000, and that doesn't do it.
One of the things that a housing land trust can do is act as an advocate as well as an educator. You know, some of this, for many of us, we may be a little more sophisticated when it comes to home purchasing. But then there's another part of the population that when it comes to financing and understanding the quality of a home that they're purchasing, it may need some assistance. And that's another thing that housing land trusts do, is they help educate people in awareness of financing as well as quality. And then every time that we get a step where we move more quality housing stock in the community, that it kind of puts pressure on those other, lesser maintained properties.
One of the
there was quite a bit of controversy over the White Pine Commons. Now, how is that coming along? Is that rental or is that purchase? And
Those are currently rental.
Uh-huh.
They're a rental that's based on, again, I believe it's the 80% the median income as being the guideline. And then they have fixed rental rate for that. There are 32 units over there. They're a mix of 2- and 3-family homes and a couple of handicapped accessible units. I don't know, Steve, have you heard anything in terms of?
No, the White Pines Common is blended. When this plan gets implemented, it eventually comes back to our office. We know if something works or does not work very quickly because we also get an outcry from the neighbors. So far to date, we've had 0 complaints from any of the surrounding neighborhoods. It's implemented into the neighborhood. It's blended right in with the neighborhood. It's provide a quality home for the 80% income that Stuart kind of alluded to in his plan. So far, there was a lot of, I guess, it wasn't going to fit into the community with some of the surroundings.
School district was concerned about.
Now it's blended fine, no complaints, no trash, no.
The school district, we talked with the Beacon Town School District, and as the plans progressed, they stepped away from.
Now, is there more land around that? Because I didn't notice any kind of recreational, area for it. They have backyards, is there surrounding area?
There's a small tot lot, kind of, children's playground area.
Mm-hmm. But not any trails or?
And they have a community center, and they actually have a community center.
Well, Phil, something else that sometimes overlooked about that plan is that it is a real cluster community in our town. And this is one of the things that we talk about in this new plan. So that what it creates is a greater amount of open space on a parcel. And that's something that probably deserves acknowledgement from a development standpoint. We've got these houses close together in a cluster, much like what we discussed in the plan and what we discussed during the club. And you've got a great big open space.
It's a pretty model. It's pretty much a model of a subdivision. It's got sidewalks. It's got a community center. It's got a small children's playground area. It's lively. The planning board held to a couple of items that they wanted to see in the plan approval. From my perspective, it appears to look pretty good.
Good.
Okay, thank you. I think one issue that's not being addressed in terms of affordable housing is, she actually brought it up with the, what's it called,
White Pine.
White Pine, yes, okay. When that was first being proposed, you saw the headlines in the paper. We don't want this, like, you constantly said, the town people were saying, we don't want this. It's gonna create sprawl, it's gonna create crime. There's a negative stigma when you say affordable housing. And you see that in the city of Plattsburgh, you see that in the town of Plattsburgh, you see that everywhere. And I think that is an issue that does need to be addressed.
Just the concept of the use of the word affordable?
Correct, it is.
Yeah, no, you're right.
And I think one thing that needs to be said is sprawl isn't going to occur here. You're not going to have a 300-unit building being built in the town of Plattsburgh. It's not going to happen. I mean, it's really not. You're going to have smaller, like a 32-unit, like what they created there. You're going to have smaller, less impact building as opposed to in New York City. And that's obvious, but you always hear the school districts complaining, well, it's going to create 200 new students coming to our school district. We can't handle that. Well, it's a misconception, and I don't see it enough in the media. Maybe in meetings it's being addressed, but I don't see that being addressed ever.
Well,
We could call it people of integrity with lower income housing.
If I could, I think the thing that also gets overlooked, you're absolutely right, when you talk about the media play that goes on with that. We saw the same thing happen when the ARC wanted to build a whole range of facilities throughout the town. But the thing that doesn't get reported is, in both instances, the town worked with the people who came forward and wanted to do the development that they wanted to do. And they made sure through their planning board and their zoning board and their planning department that, the rules that the town has for planning and for zoning were adhered to. As long as they were being adhered to, then the town supported that development. And it went forward, it was built, and in all those instances, I can take you back when I was on a board previously with every one of those ARC facilities, and clearly it's happened with the White Pines Common. It gets built, it's built properly, and there is no problem. Okay? And what happens is, in many ways, people who are in a neighborhood who might have had a fear about what's the impact of this going to be, that fear is, it's eradicated by the reality of who their new neighbors are, and they're not afraid of their new neighbors. They see that, and I think that does not get reported, and I think that's what's being talked about. You do a plan, and you have a plan that is properly constituted. You have the ability for there to be, development of all range of housing. And it should be proper, it should work.
Comprehensive planning is going to answer the problem that this young man mentioned in the back, is that you're never going to see a 300 unit. I don't agree with that. 300 units are going to pop up in 2 years. if you get the right company that wants to use Plattsburgh as a place of business, Plattsburgh will be in a position to deal with 300 units, if need be, and have it done right. We didn't have that at hand in 1964 when Champlain Park was built, in Cliff Haven. We had less the best of the sewer districts, sewer main put in, the roads weren't even met to any standard. We had to rebuild them all, and the developer came in and made all kinds of money, and the town picked up the whole tab. That was the beginning of planning. You learn the hard way.
Yeah, you learn the hard way.
Now we're in a position to be in the driver's seat, and people come in, they're not going to rewrite the book. The book is already written.
I'd just like to pick up for a moment and just and remind the group here tonight that this is the town's 4th comprehensive plan. First one was back in '64. And Arthur and I have had a number of conversations that reflect the nature of a community in the North Country at that time period that embarked on land use planning in the community. And it wasn't an ideal situation in terms of going over well with everyone in the community. But the leaders of the community at that time stepped forward and moved that along. The process then was again repeated in the early 80s. The town had an opportunity again at the closure of the Air Force Base using federal funds to go out and do another revision. That's 10 years dated, and the town board stepped up again in the last 2 years to go ahead and recognize the need and put money on the table, received a state grant, and has moved forward with this one. As I've looked at these 4 plans, there's no question in my mind in the evolution of the planning process here in the town, a number of things. One is the community, as you look at it, does reflect the fact that there are land use regulations and zoning regulations that are applied in this community. And the second part is that the tone in this comprehensive plan takes on a different character. It's obviously reflecting a different point in time over the life of those last 4 of these all 4 plans, to show what Stuart had identified, and I know that Colin has done a great job of articulating in terms of sustainable quality and attractive community. So I think that that's expressed quite well in there, and it gives us really a great starting point for the next round of discussions in this community.
Good enough. Let me hitchhike on what Art and Marty was talking about, doing the process. We do the planning, and we get the results and such, and there's a piece in the amending of the zoning plan that I read, 18B on page 101, that asks, or that says we should revise the zoning ordinance to allow the planning board to waive design guidelines, which were built, without need for a variance. Now, what is the rationale behind that, please?
Design, these are not the rules of zoning as you're thinking about them in terms of height, area, and use, which they can't waive. Those are all sort of in the zoning, they gotta go to the zoning board of appeals. These would be the design guidelines we would adopt for the commercial development. And what often happens is that there are practical difficulties with meeting some element of those, and it's not needed or appropriate to send it to the zoning board of appeals. It's a pretty common way of dealing with their need to look at a development flexibly and on a case-by-case basis within the overall guidelines. That's what that's intended to get to. The devil will be in how we write it.
So the design guidelines is a recommendation to do in the future here. The design guidelines would be things that are often being aesthetic.
Right. Can you give us a specific example of a guideline?
Window. Well, yeah. Sure. Architectural. You can have architectural guidelines that talk about how the building is supposed to look, and drawing on as a neighborhood develops, and you start getting a trend of which you've seen here in the town already with some of the Adirondack style use of horizontal wood siding and stone. So if your design guideline was written in a way to really make it, encourage that to happen, but for some legitimate reason somebody's got a plan that they're putting forth before the planning board, they can work that out with the planning board rather than having to go and get a variance.
Window spacing. If we adopted design guidelines that required a certain window spacings, and I'm thinking here about a big box store that has no windows at all. And so it's typical and common in design guidelines to require a certain window spacing to get away from that. And so there it is, and you've got to have one window every 50 feet. Building comes in, they have an architect, they've done something great and clever, but it doesn't have that particular spacing. The planning board can say, it's great, we love it, the heck with the window spacing, this is better. That's why. They could also do something terrible and say, no, we like the cinder block wall, which is your fear probably. And so there's always that tension between, is it a hard and fast rule, or do you give them flexibility? I like to give a good board flexibility because you'll get better design. A bad board shouldn't have it.
Okay, well, what about the precedent of being flexible versus going through the, I'll call it the formal variance process, and if the big box needs
Zoning boards
the
can't
concrete wall,
hear,
you get it.
zoning boards really can't hear that kind of variance unless it's written in a certain way, and I don't want to write it in that way. Their legal responsibilities relate to use and area requirements, not design guidelines, and unless I made the design guidelines an area requirement, they can't even hear it. I wouldn't write it as an area requirement. It's bad because you know why? Because zoning boards of appeals have absolutely no idea what buildings should look like. That's not their job. They're quasi-judicial. It's not an insult, guys, whoever you are. They are a quasi-judicial body who have to decide on 5 criteria for area requirements. None of them have to do with aesthetics. It's the wrong thing for them to do. It really is. It's just, trust me on this. Your point is well taken, though, and revisit this when we write the zoning, because how we write it really matters. Really, really matters. What the guidelines are. The guidelines are very general. You will never need to waive anything because they'll be very general. If they're so specific as to be window spacing, then we have to talk about it. I don't know what they're going to be. It's a good question.
Improving the sewer districts, and I see you mentioned Morrisonville only. As you know, the Saranac River is developed, Morrisonville is part of Morrisonville, and actually everything along the Saranac River. It's Caterville. And Caterville has the potential of growth. Most recently, there's a piece of property that's for sale by the school district. It's not served by sewer, but if you have a sewer facility that can be improved by just adding a pod to it. And actually, that had not been mentioned. Those 2 areas right now have sewer going into the Saranac River. Right at this time, even though anybody don't want to admit it. And why this gets away with it, I don't know. But it's time that I think that those 2 areas be addressed.
Thanks. Somebody hasn't spoken yet? Go ahead.
Okay, I have another question. In the plan, you talk about beautifying the entry points. And tonight you said something about a theme. How do you go about beautifying an entry port like Cumberland headquarters? Cumberland headquarters, that's definitely an entry port, isn't it?
Oh, I know what you're talking about there.
I mean, there's a motel, there's a kind of half gas station, there's a trailer park, there's a crate center.
There's a lot.
It's a dog, let's face it.
Well, you can't work miracles everywhere. You know, welcome to Plattsburgh. You have a sign, you have a theme, you have sort of coordinated set of, colors, planning. I can't fix it.
No, I mean, but what do you do on private land? Do you ask them to put a sign up, or?
No, that's not the intent here. That's not the intent here. The intent is-
Actually, the town's already been doing it in a number of
On the
locations.
sign, with the sign?
Yes.
And there's a common theme with the lighthouse and the mountains and the lake.
On the
We
sign?
need to build on it.
Yeah.
You build on it.
I got an answer, Deb. Debbie, you put a roundabout there with a garden in the middle.
One thing that was mentioned in the slides was rezoning on Cumberland Head. Could you just touch on that a little bit? Because the zoning on Cumberland Head was always a very touchy subject, and I don't know if anybody missed it or not, but I caught it.
No, and it may yet be touched again. One of the things that we heard, at least from some of the folks on Cumberland Head, was that they would like lower densities. They're basically zone 1 acre there, and so the proposal is to take at least some of the open space and create a new district that would be like a 2-acre district. And that would be, again, something that in zoning we'll have to see how the people feel out there, but that's the plan.
So I didn't, you know, I was afraid that you were talking about less strict rather than more strict.
No, more strict.
Because that would be.
Because we think that's what at least some of the people want out there. Now, I don't know that everybody does, and we'll see what the landowners have to say, but that was certainly the message that we got.
One of the issues that you brought up in your presentation is this concept that we may end up creating committees in these hamlets, in these residential areas, and have them working, you know, so they come back with guidelines that are their guidelines.
It's clearly, it's one of the strengths of Plattsburgh, because all the various neighborhood hamlets that exist in Plattsburgh, they give character and uniqueness to this community. Some have taken more participatory interest in their particular neighborhoods in one form or another, and others have less so. But we sure do have some very distinct hamlet communities in Plattsburgh. And that would be a great thing for individual hamlets to then embark upon an interest on their own to pursue a better dialogue with planning process.
It's my understanding that I know you're going to have a special meeting on this a week from Monday, but the county airport is county property. And it's my understanding that they're the ones that will decide who they're going to sell it to. Could you just talk a little bit about how their plans or how the zoning may help or hinder their ability to sell that property?
Actually, it's a very good question.
It's a great question. I'll start and then you can jump in. The new owners of the property, whoever they may be, will be subject to the town zoning. And from my point of view, I mean, the reason that we fast-tracked this was so that the new owners would know what the rules are going in. So when they buy it, they know what they're getting.
A couple of things. First is that the Development Corporation as an agency or an entity of its own here in the community, in the county, several years ago, paid for a master plan to be produced for that property, to kind of give a sense to the community what the potential of that property could hold for itself. They have not acquired the property because it hasn't been offered for sale yet, and they haven't put a proposal in for it. In this process of the committee, the subcommittee working on this, there were several meetings that took place with the county present with us. The county recognized, in my understanding, that the town's planning for land use of that was very important to them, and it was a town issue. It wasn't a county issue. Recognizing that, then the county actually in the proposal that will be going out to offer the land for sale does recognize in that plan that the county is updating, or that the town of Plattsburgh is updating its plan, and that interested individuals should go ahead and be attentive to the town's planning process. And we are trying to get this moving along. We've got the proposed map for the zoning change. We've got the zoning language. And we've actually even done an overlay of this plan with the County Development Corporation's plan. They're not exactly identical, but there's a lot of common overlap and there's a lot of commonality between the plans. This committee didn't go ahead and walk up and say, we're just going to put a rubber stamp on the County Development Corporation's plan. They looked at it with a slightly different interest, a town perspective, town residents perspective, and then they came up with a plan that does come very similar to that. I do want to just say that there's always the mechanism in the town zoning ordinance right now, today, that if an entity wants to come to the town and make a proposal for a planned development district, we currently have in the zoning ordinance very clearly established section of the ordinance that provides for that allowance. It is a town board authority. The town board could perhaps go to the planning board and ask for a planning board report back to them as they deliberated on somebody coming to them with a plan. So that mechanism is always there. So you've got the two options. You've got what a committee of a group of people in the town have looked at in an interest of integrating a comprehensive plan as a whole with a specific geographic area, coming up with a set of zoning regulations for that. And then you also have the provisions for somebody being able to do something that doesn't fit that.
Bill, would you speak to the manner in which the county and the town work together?
In the sense of that we had face-to-face meeting with them, open dialogue about the process, what the county's interest was going to be in that property, discussions about the process involving the FAA in terms of the guidelines that the county had to toe to in this process of being able to offer this property for sale. The county recognizing the Development Corporation plan to some sense that it created an idea of the potential redevelopment for that property, but not necessarily a plan, a dialogue between the two parties, and a recognition by the county that this was a town responsibility in terms of coming up with a land use plan.
Doesn't the county planning board still have a review process on any improvements made in the town?
The provisions of the county for development plan review, the planning board reviews plan, the planning board, the local municipality refers plans to the county planning board, and they do have an opportunity for review as well. So yes, there's always that link there.
Just a silly question. I'm very close to this airport development project, maybe half a mile, you and I, or less. What would that do to our property taxes in the area?
You know, I always take those questions that when people ask about property taxes and say, go talk to the tax assessor.
I don't want to talk to him.
Okay, let's just go back to, quality, attractive, sustainable. So it's not looking to detract from your property value.
I wish it would sometimes.
Hopefully you'll maintain your property value, and your property value would also, many people like their property value to appreciate in value over time. It's the tax part, right, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is.
That, that comes to play here.
Yes.
I mean, if you had, the tax assessor goes through this all the time. If you could sell your property on the market, what would you want to sell it at?
A fair price so that my neighbors wouldn't have to suffer from my having sold my property at an outrageous price.
Good answer. And then the price at which, you want it to be taxed at, are generally two different things.
The neighbor, I hope he sells his home, but not for an outrageous price, because my taxes will go up if he sells that home for 3 times what it's actually worth. I don't think you'll have any. All right.
Any other comments?
Okay, there's 2 about transportation links. You want to make a transportation link from, you didn't mention it in the thing, but it was in the draft, Ampersand Drive to the airport, which is interesting to me because there's an interstate literally within a half mile from there, which is not even congested by any means. And then by the airport, there's a exit 36, which is a mile to a mile and a half away. If you really needed a link, perhaps moving exit 36 closer to the airport, you're going to create another bridge over the Saranac River. It's that neighborhood, it has a lot of trails behind it. It's behind the college, the field house. So there's a lot of bike trails, there's a lot of fisheries. It's a really natural area, one of the few untouched areas in this town. And I think that's a poor choice to try to make a connection there. So that's just my opinion. I don't know if anybody shares it, but I don't see the need for that.
I absolutely agree with you, and I don't think you're going to see. I don't think you're going to see the state of New York spend money to build a bridge and a road that will be closer into Plattsburgh. If anything, they will be building further out from where they are, not closer.
In truth, that was one of our more dreamy ideas. But
maybe what really goes better with that concept is for the town, the county, and New York State to revisit this interest in transportation corridors. and in addressing it, maybe then taking a more comprehensive and carefully planned approach to solving transportation issues here.
We've had a couple of meetings to that extent where the town, the city, the county, transportation, the mayor, myself, et cetera, did meet. And we did look at the corridors, the intensity of traffic volume, and thought through to the future, the development of the former Air Base airport property, the impact that would have, where new bridges, new connector roads need to go. We actually have some physical drafts of some options. And I see that happening more and in the future. And as you talk sometimes, the media does about affordable housing, the media has done a nice job on the relationship between the town and the city. I sat here quietly, but the relationship between the town and the city is probably as good as it's ever been. It's a pretty seamless situation. The mayor and I communicate as we need. That doesn't mean we always agree. We share where we can. We've collaborated on some things formally. And even more important, our departments can pick up the phone anytime and consider their counterpart in the other municipality as a partner, a resource, so we don't waste money or duplicate where that's doable. I'm totally convinced that in the event something significant happens, we talked about we'll never see. Well, there are a lot of people said we'll never see a Target, we'll never see a Hilton product, we'll never see a Marriott product. That's going to be announced soon. There are a lot of things we'll never see that are happening. You might have that. We might see a Laurentian. If something significant, I'll use the word Laurentian again, were to take place where you had a lot of construction, a need for 1,000-man workforce, you're going to see a lot of things change. And exactly what you're talking about will happen. The beauty is we've already set the model to come together and to talk and work on a regional issue. And I'm confident we'll be able to do that again and really get results.
So that's one of the things that the master plan can do is it can focus attention. It may not be the right attention or the right place, but it focuses the attention. If it withstands the passage of time, we find that many plans, as planning, you know that many plans, and we've seen them here in the town of Plattsburgh, sometimes it takes a long time for everything to come into place. So if it can withstand, several rounds of a master planning process and still come out intact, it may not be the right place, but it at least goes in and helps to encourage the dialogue to go ahead and talk about the issue. Well,
I have two comments, one specific and one general. The general one, first of all, the media seldom reports on success with regard to White Pine Commons, for example. I had that thought before, and it just come up again here. And it's too bad, but they seldom do. Bad news sells. And then the other comment, which jumped out of the presentation, was what the gentleman over here mentioned, the thought of a connector road somewhere from the county airport area to Ampersand Drive or Ruby Street. And just sit with that thought for a minute, not to start a debate here. But suppose you're at the county airport, and for whatever reason you need to drive to Bosse's at Route 3 in the Military Turnpike. Do you know how inconvenient that is at present? How long a trip that is?
Oh, I can
And
tell you.
I mean, you know, and I know.
Because we go from here,
So
to the south end of the town, and
Right.
you got to go south. You got to go north and south to go south.
Just keep that thought for a few minutes. And I mean, building an interstate, that's a nice idea, but that wouldn't be as convenient as a road in there every time you
It's
come
not
from.
the county airport, it's the new airport, correct?
The new
I
airport.
believe it was a new airport, not the county airport.
Right. No, it spent some time with us here
Well,
in
no,
town,
I'm
having to
talking
go
about the
forward
former
there.
county
But
airport, sorry.
again, we're not here tonight to debate that particular part. It's part of a plan, it's part of the process, and by revisiting it or focusing attention to it is what really counts.
My only comment, my only thought there was it certainly has some validity as a suggestion.
I don't know, but is there the Saranac River Trail that's being put together in the city, is that tied into this plan at all?
Yeah, the idea is actually to continue that, the concept is continue it along.
But we need a larger buffer.
Trail plan.
It's
back towards 20 of 9. Want to
Yeah.
wrap up unless there's anything else?
The last thing that we've got on the agenda here, and you can't see it, so, I think we have here tonight 10 of the comprehensive plan committee members. We've got the chairperson, Colin Reed. Can I just get the planning board, or the committee members to stand? They all deserve. We'll let Colin, would you like to make a couple of comments about it? And we also have cake and coffee in the back.
Could you introduce the people?
Sure.
I'll go and introduce themselves. I think you all have introduced yourselves already. So,
I'm Tim Palmer. I work with the county health department, and the health aspects of this plan have been of particular interest.
I'm Marty Mannix. I'm a member of the town board, deputy supervisor, and one of the first things I was involved with in the town of Plattsburgh was the planning board, and it's been a delight to be on this committee. It's been a great committee.
I'm Betty Ann King. I'm a retired educator, and I have been very educated by being on this committee, and I think it's well worthwhile. We've got a great town.
I'm Hope Courier. I'm a business owner. Actually, my business is in the city of Plattsburgh, but it's on the Oval. I'm a Cumberland Head resident, and I'm very pleased to be on this committee. I think we've done a pretty good job.
I'm Eric Day. Work for Clinton County as well for the Office of Emergency Services, and I guess I consider myself, as I'm getting older a little bit, I guess, but a younger person who stayed in Plattsburgh and enjoyed being a part of this as somebody who's staying here and building a house and trying to make a go of it. So.
Jerry Rosenbaum. I'm a business owner. I real estate. I used to work here about 25 years ago, and I enjoy volunteering and helping out the town.
I'm Jeff Wagner. I'm here because of Marty Mannix. One time I mentioned to him if there was an opening on the planning board, I wouldn't mind applying for it. I started on the committee and now I'm on the planning board. So they sucked me in really good. I'm a Cumberland Head resident, and I formerly, my previous life, used to be one of the guys on the other side of the fence. I worked for developers. I turned to a good guy now.
You had to say that. We forced him. I'm Dave Kimmel. I'm from the stunning hamlet of Katyville. I'm a business owner, and I also am on the town planning board.
Tom Wood. I live on Gasoline Drive. 3 gas stations across the road from me. I'm 22. I've been long resident of this area, and I like to keep building up trees and planting more trees and having more woods and open space.
All right. Give me something to hold that.
There are 2 members here that are not. There are 2 members not here tonight. Ellie Berger from Cumberland Head is on the committee, and then also Glenn Cutter. Glenn was on the last committee. Glenn is a planner with the county as well. So this has been a great group of people that I've worked with for quite a while now, and it's been an enjoyable process and a very enlightening one. And thank you all for your participation. And with that, we have a wonderful cake.
But I guess we all can't take the whole map home. I guess you have to look at it first.
Jeff wants the lighthouse.
Well, before it gets cut, you should look at the map on it.
Thank you very much.